Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I am your host, Sal, here with my co-host, Monty. What's going on, Monty?
What's going on, man? Just doing some of our reviews here for the linebacker and feeling draft season again. A little excitement last week, right back to feeling for draft season. Not too excited about the Giants. But that's how it goes.
That's how it goes. And I'm sending word out to everybody that we are live, so we're going to send this out. So please join us. And we're doing our linebacker review today, in addition to some Giants talk. For those who are interested, the linebacker review is really actually a lot better than we thought it was going to be going into this, right? I mean, I think we were both surprised at how good these guys are.
Mm-hmm. But almost, we'll get into it, but it's almost like just like a lot of guys are around the same level. It feels like it's not like oh, there's like some okay guys and some great guys, just like good players.
Yeah, there's some very good players.
Mhm.
And I feel like it is a class where you might actually find value, where even if you're not exactly looking for a linebacker, there's so many good players that you may just decide that these guys are the BPA on day two. So don't be, sneaky position to watch for the Giants, right? Nobody's really thinking about it, but I can see like one of these guys because they're so good being drafted. So we'll get into that. Thank you guys for joining us. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Alex. Everybody who's here. Spread the word. We're going to just get started here, I think. So before we go into the positional review of linebacker, we are going to talk a little bit about the Giants. So this past Sunday, they hosted Sunday Night Football against the Bengals, and momentum coming in from the Seattle game. Already, we all talked about it. We want to keep that momentum going for once so we can believe in them. They come out, and what do? They shit the bed, and they score 7 points. Their defense plays lights out, only gives up really 10 points all game, except for like that garbage time touchdown by Chase Brown at the very end. But basically holds down what's one of, if not the best NFL offenses there is in Joe Burrow's Bengals. And our offense responds by putting up nothing. One touchdown, 7 points. That's it. So that's been the talk of the town. What were your takes after the game now that you've had a few days to think about it?
It was a disappointing loss, man, because our our fucking defense played fantastic. They were for a game that we really felt like we had to win a shootout to some extent. Playing a bad, we went over it. Like one of the bottom defenses in the league and one of the best offenses in the league. Um, it we really felt like we had to score a lot, and our defense could only do so much. Our defense did an awesome job. I mean, outside of like the last 2 minutes of the game, they let up 10 points for what 58 minutes of that game. So like shout out to the defense. Everybody was getting pressure on these guys, and we were getting turnovers. Really, really good game, but the offense was limited, man, and I think it was showed by the quarterback position. I think that we've seen the game. Daniel Jones hasn't been anything special this year outside. Seattle, he's very good, very good. We gave him credit, but for the most part, he hasn't been anything special. But he hasn't really been a detriment. But this game, he was a detriment. They knew exactly what to do to cover Daniel Jones. They were coming down and crashing on all the short stuff, and we were trying to get these like 16, 18 play drives. I mean, the Giants lead the NFL in offensive plays, and we are in the bottom of the league in scoring. We don't have those explosive plays to shorten these drives because we have a quarterback that is incapable of getting them. And when you look at the tape, you saw they were there on many occasions on fourth downs where you shouldn't be put in so many of these fourth down situations, but we were. And on these fourth down situations, we didn't convert. You saw guys that were still schemed open, and Daniel Jones missed them. So whether it wasn't converting fourth downs, whether it was just not getting explosive plays, it was not a good game for Daniel Jones at all. And truly, more than any game I've seen in a while, he was like close to the sole reason we lost that game as he has been in a while. So that was tough to watch, and I think it was a a wake up call for a lot of people after the Seattle game, which kind of like, hey, if he does this for the rest of the season, maybe this is the guy. Goes back to being Daniel Jones, especially in prime time.
I mean, the team stats I pulled up, I don't know if you had a chance to look at them, but they're astonishing. So total yards, the Giants had 309, the Bengals only had 304. Passing yards, the Giants had 190, the Bengals had 183. Rushing yards, it was almost a wash. Giants had 119, they had 121. They had 5.8 yards per play to the Giants, 4.2. But listen to this. First downs, the Giants had 24 to the Bengals 13. Third down efficiency, the Giants 5 of 15, the Bengals 4 of 11. Fourth down efficiency, the Giants 3 of 5, the Bengals didn't have any fourth down plays. Total plays, Bengals 52, Giants 74. 22 more plays on offense. The Giants only allowed 2 sacks, but they got 4 sacks on Joe Burrow. The Giants punted only 4 times. The Bengals punted 6 times. The Bengals had 6 penalties for 67 yards. The Giants had 2 penalties for 9 yards. Interceptions, Joe Burrow had none. Daniel Jones had 1. And time of possession, the Giants won 34 to 25. 34 minutes to 25 minutes and 53 seconds. If I gave you just those numbers and said, "Hey, predict the score," you would have probably predicted like Giants win 27 to 10 or something like that. Yet we lost 17-7.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just
Yeah, man.
unbelievable, like how they cannot convert what they're doing into points. And I think you're right. I do think it's just a function of quarterback play to some extent. I do think there's play calling issues in crucial moments also.
Mm-hmm.
That's an issue for another day. But I mean, I you got to wonder where they're going here. Like, I mean, the way I look at it is if you want to lay blame at the feet of Daniel Jones, you're perfectly right to. But you gave us this QB room, and if you're so good without Daniel Jones, I think it's time to prove it. It's time to put up
Mm-hmm.
or shut up Brian Dable. If Daniel Jones is the reason you can't score points and win games, bench him. Let's prove what you can do with the other guy, and don't tell me that you can't do with the other guy because you and Joe Shane are the ones who picked the other guy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I hear you from like the aspect that they picked this room, so it's like work with it. It's what you did. Fucking make something happen. I'll say as far as and I do think personally I do think we'll see Drew Lock at some point this season. I could be wrong, but I do think that's going to happen at some point in time. Um the tough thing is you're changing. I don't know if, you know, I think we'll score more points with Drew Lock. I do think that would happen. I think this offense would be more explosive, and I think we will score more points. But I think a guy like Drew Lock, makes it harder for your defense. So it's like it's picking your poison. I think a guy like Daniel Jones limits turnovers. You play the field position game, and it makes it easier for your defense to try to win the game for you. With Drew Lock, you really need your defense to kind of like step up to the next level and get you out of a lot more bad situations. But your points per game is probably gonna go up. So I don't know. I assume we're gonna try it at one point, but it's bad quarterback one way or bad quarterback another way. You might get more points per game, but if the turnovers go up, it's a whole different thing we're sitting here talking about us having to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, Jay Ferry says that we shouldn't be blaming the GM and the head coach. Um, and the reality is they picked him. I mean, you can argue all you want they didn't, but they paid him. And I don't really want to get into this argument about like who made that call. They made that call and it's their guy and they haven't chosen to come out of it. So it is year 3 at this point. I'm not in the camp of like, well, it's year 1 or whatever. Like it's year
Hmm.
3, show some results, win some football games, figure out a way to show. I mean, you're showing progress in some ways, and I think you have to be fair that they are, but it's not enough. You gotta win some games. Figure it out, I mean, if you're such a good coach, you can figure this out. Go score points and win games. We're scoring 16 points per game, man. All that investment in offensive line, Malik Neighbors, who I mean, he's missed the last 2 games, but he was a powerhouse while he was playing. All of these things, right? And you're scoring 16 points per game. That's
Hmm.
just not acceptable. And Brian Dable's an offensive coach, right? That's what he's heralded for, is being an offensive coach. 16 points per game is not acceptable. End of story. So
Yeah.
just be better. Figure it out. Go be better. Win games.
Yep.
You got news today that Andrew Thomas is done for the year with a Frank injury to the foot, which is typically a dislocated bone in the foot. And he needed surgery to fix the ligaments, I presume. Today, I'm not sure if he had that in Charlotte. He went down to Ortho Carolina to a renowned foot expert to have it done. I believe he did it there, but I'm not sure. But he's done for the year. So yeah, and we lose our left tackle. And next man up is not Evan Neal. It is apparently Josh Azudu at left tackle. So just give me what your thoughts are on that one, man.
It's frustrating. I mean, all of it's frustrating. It's frustrating losing, one of the best players on our team, the best player in our offense, I think, bar none, is the best player in our offense. Andrew Thomas. He's been the glue for us for a while. And Bobby Skinner posted it. He's posted it last year too. Just like the difference between our offense with Andrew Thomas in and with him not in, and it's like a 4 or 5 point per game difference. Like, hopefully our offensive line being better all around won't be that drastic of a difference, but it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. He's a great football player, and he's constantly dealing with injuries. And at some point, we might have to talk about if that's something we have to start considering moving forward. But that's a conversation for another day. But that's worrisome. And then I think there's some part of it where you could have looked at like, look, this isn't a good thing by any means, but maybe there's a bright side. We can try to figure out who Evan Neal is. Give Evan Neal a real shot, and spend the rest of the year really figuring out who this guy is. Nope, you are starting Josh Azudu. So they spent this entire offseason trying to find a way to get Evan Neal into the lineup. They moved Illuminor from right tackle to left guard. They moved John Runyon from right guard to left guard. Like, they shuffled everything around, and then as soon as Evan Neal got hurt, they shuffled everything back. They moved people different sides of the line, moved them to new positions, and they did all that to try to get Evan Neal in. And now that we have a spot open for him, they're not even willing to put him in the lineup. It's a shame, I don't know if it's true. For our listener, I heard a little rumor that Evan Neal doesn't know the protections. I don't know if that's true or not, but something I heard. So if that's true, that's even more concerning. But explain why he's not there. So yeah, man, it's Evan Neal is becoming. He was already looking like a bust. He's looking more and more like a colossal bust every single day. They're afraid to even move him to guard or try him. It looks like they're totally given up on this kid.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I wish they would have been playing him at guard if this is going to be the approach, but maybe he hasn't earned it. I have no idea what's going on over there. It's just unfortunate. Losing HE sucks. I heard some of my favorite pods talking about it like it was the end of the season and a funeral and this and that. And I'm like, man, teams that lose offensive linemen don't talk like this typically. Like they don't say like
Mhm.
it's all over because you lost one guy. Um, I understand why they're saying it, but I think that the fact that people feel that way is that honestly, that's on the GM. You shouldn't feel like your whole roster is dependent on a left tackle,
Mhm.
and it's unfortunate, but here we are again. So hopefully these guys have learned something. It is Josh Azudu's third year, and maybe Evan Neal plays, but maybe we can have them do something, right? Maybe we'll find out these guys can be useful.
And I'll say, I don't know how much is the end of the world. It's obviously not good, but I think we have a strong enough overall offensive line that we're not going to sink into total disaster. I don't think it's going to be a strength like it's been for us, which sucks. But at the same time, like, why do we need this much time for an offensive line when we're unwilling to throw the ball deep? You should get the ball out immediately anyway if you're not willing to take deep shots in this offense. So,
Yep.
what does that change for our offense? Maybe a little worse run blocking.
Yep. The good news is Malik Neighbors is practicing with the red jersey on, but he's practicing, so hopefully he'll get through concussion protocol this week and play. Um, Brian Burns he has a groin injury that flared up, but he said he'll be okay, and he plans to play. And Dexter Lawrence had an injury, and he's saying he'll be playing. So I mean, otherwise, it looks like they're going to be okay, and everybody's going to be out there. So they have a game this Sunday against the Eagles. Saquon Barkley returning home. Giants 2-4. Winnable game in my opinion. All the stuff we just set aside. The Eagles are not looking very good. Their defense is kind of in shambles. Their offense has had, a sputtering start due to injuries and just kind of inconsistent play calling. It's a game the Giants can win. The Giants are at home. They need to win this game. They need to take this. If they don't win this game, they fall to 2-5. Saquon Barkley gets to celebrate on their field. Not a good look. So they got to figure out a way to win this game.
One way or another, man. Hopefully, Dexter Lawrence said he's playing, so we'll take him at his word, and that'll be helpful if he is. So we'll see.
Yep. All right. You want to get started on this linebacker stuff? We're 15 minutes in.
Yeah, man. I'm done with Giants talk. Let's get
Yeah,
back
let's
to
get
the
to
college football.
let's get to the fun stuff. Sorry
Yeah.
about the depressing portion of our programming. All right, so we have 5 guys that we graded out for you guys, and we decided because we had different grades and because they're all really good, and we're not going to rank them. We're just going to go one by one, give our assessment, and you guys can get a chance to look at all of them. There are a couple of names that we left off this that I think that we'll get to later that, that we'll just mention them, guys that are worth paying attention to, but we're just going to go through our 5 and we'll just kind of show you guys where we are with this class. Give me one second. I'm just loading up everything here on my end. But it's a good class. I mean, as an intro, I said at the beginning, we were not expecting the linebacker class to be this good. And,
It hasn't been good for a while.
right. And then when we started watching these guys were like really good, we looked at Dane Brugler and said, oh, wow, there's 5 of these guys in the top 50. That's rare. Usually you see 1 or 2 guys in the top 50 from linebacker. So this is a good off-ball linebacker group. So I'm pretty psyched about it. So why don't we get started with a guy who came into the season as, the top of the list and, and things will change, but let's just go into it. I'll start.
Go for it.
The first player we're going over, you guys must know by now who are college football fans, is Harold Perkins Jr. from LSU. He's a 6 foot tall, 225-pound off-ball linebacker, so really undersized even for an off-ball linebacker at 225. That's probably like 20th percentile or 30th percentile. He was a 5-star recruit out of college. He is a junior. He was first team All SEC in 2022 as a freshman, and he was for second team All SEC last year. His PFF grades are strong. I mean, his most recent one in 2023 was a 71.1 overall grade, 59.4 against the run, 62.3 against the tackle, as in tackling, and 72.8 in the pass rush, with an 81 coverage grade. So kind of a good all-around player. Last year, he had 75 total tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles, and he did miss about 18% of his tackles, and that is an issue that comes up on his tape a little bit, and we'll get into that. But he was a top high school recruit as a linebacker coming into college. And what when you watch him, what is very obvious about Perkins is just his athleticism. He's explosive, very fast, explosive athlete, twitchy, and he's versatile. So I mean, you see LSU line him up everywhere. They line him up, as basically as like an edge rusher. They line him up as a nickel, in coverage. Everything in between, like in the box, middle linebacker, weak side linebacker. He demonstrates that sideline to sideline speed you're looking for in an off-ball linebacker because he can cover the whole field, and he's a run and chase defender. Like he'll chase after the ball. You see him used in blitz packages where he's a real weapon, rushing the passer. When he's not rushing the passer, he's got a very good IQ, in my opinion. He diagnoses plays quickly, makes a break on the ball. He's a solid tackler. He sheds blocks pretty well for a guy his size, and he uses that athleticism to carry running backs and tight ends in coverage, fluid in coverage, almost like a true DB. And he does have a takeaway mentality. Now, from a cons perspective, he's small. I mean, he's 225. And that's small for an off-ball linebacker. And they're trying to, his whole tape is about selling him as a hybrid that can be used as an edge. 225 is small for an off-ball. 225 for an edge is like unheard of. I mean, I don't know if that would work in the NFL. And when he's playing pure off-ball linebacker, which is I think where he's going to land in the NFL because of his size, his production does drop off. So there is some concern there. I don't think they're true natural instincts at the linebacker position. He doesn't have a true nose for football. Again, stacking shot's not really part of his game. He does get bullied by O linemen sometimes because of his size. And again, it's sort of the same theme. He's a tweener in college. He's a tweener edge slash off ball linebacker. Um, but Harold Perkins is an intriguing athlete just because of how explosive he is. I think NFL teams love athletes like this. I'll stop there. What do you think about him? You're muted.
My bad. So I was obviously very intrigued by Harold Perkins' profile. He is a freak athlete, very, very explosive player that pops off the tape. The one thing was when I went into watching him, I was kind of expecting like a true like elite difference maker. That was kind of what he was built up to me from, kind of just flashes I've seen and kind of the way people talked about him. I saw him as a Swiss Army knife who didn't overly impress me in like a particular area. I thought he was somebody who you could deploy all over the place, and I thought he was a good football player, but he is not the ideal linebacker I'm looking for, and I don't necessarily know what he is the ideal for me. He is not, there's not one area where I'm like, this guy's fantastic at this outside of being a great explosive athlete. As far as him being an athlete and being able to play anywhere, he's fantastic. He is a freak athlete. Uh, you know, he can carry even up to wide receivers and coverage. He's a guy who can really, use his athleticism in the pass rush. He can cover sideline to sideline, but he's not a guy who I felt like was an impact player on a down by down basis. That's kind of where I came away a little bit disappointed with Harold Perkins. I didn't feel like his impact was always felt when I was watching him. That might be more of a product of how they used him, that they haven't used Harold Perkins to, maximize his ability. Yeah, I think that is definitely part of the case of that on this. Um, but it, I expected him to be the clear linebacker one in this group, and I don't necessarily feel that way. But I do feel like he has the highest upside in this group. I think, one thing you mentioned, like one thing that really impressed me is his hips. When he's like dropping into coverage, his hips are so smooth. He looks so natural, like flipping his hips and floating around in coverage. It really gives me a lot of hope that he could be a really impressive coverage linebacker, which I think would totally change my look on Harold Perkins. If he's a guy who maybe has some deficiencies in the run game from like a strength standpoint, but if he offers what he does already as a pass rusher, then really can add a strong coverage impact. I think that would change my impact, and that's where I could potentially see him really thrive at the next level. Because although I think he is a good pass rusher, I don't think he's any more than just a blitzer. So that's my thought on him.
I think
What are
that's
your thoughts on
fair.
that?
No, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, we should probably get to the grades. I mean, we've talked about like his projections and player comps. A lot of that's screwed up because the kid tore his ACL a few weeks back, and his mom was famously on Twitter arguing about HIPAA violations, which was not a real thing. Upset that people reported it, but he did tear his ACL, so it's going to hurt his stock. He would have been, in my opinion, kind of a tweener round one guy. He's probably firmly a day two guy at this point. I don't think he falls like beyond like the early third round, late second round at this. I think he's too talented for that. But somebody's going to take him. He's almost like from a comp perspective, there are different comps you can come up with. Like the way you describe him, he sounds like kind of like a smaller version of Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah,
You know, um,
that's a little bit how I feel watching him.
I mean, there are people like when you watch him. Even I felt like this there in his tape from 2023, where there's a little bit of Micah Parsons in him. Like a
Mhm.
downhill linebacker who is really great at rushing the passer. Maybe it's just blitzes, but he can play as an off-ball linebacker. I think you like Devin White as a comp, but I think you guys get the picture. Like that kind of a blitzing linebacker with athleticism. And I don't mean Devin White now. I mean, back when he was initially drafted. So
And
not
well,
this
and
guy.
I honestly will say, like, yeah, Devin White early in his NFL career is kind of feel because you really saw him like, he struggled at times. He had a lot. He got all pros, only that. But if you look deeper, he was really kind of struggled in run defense. But where he made his mark, he was like a guy who could get like 10 sacks from blitzing from the off ball linebacker position. When I made that comp, I didn't even think about the LSU connection, but I definitely could see a guy who, although, his limitations, physically, can really use his athleticism to be an impact or as a blitzer and, use to have some coverage. That's where I kind of saw the Devin White comparison
Uh,
there. And similar
so
size.
so we have slightly different grades on him. Speed and quickness, we both gave him a 5. I
Yeah, I
think
think
that's
that
very
one's
obvious when you
clear.
watch him. Power and strength, you gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. I thought he displayed adequate enough power for a guy his size, but I see where you're giving him a 2 because of some of the stack and shed issues.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he got bullied. I saw him at times like play after play. If the offensive linemen got their hands on him, or just burying him into the dirt. It was, well, I will say, scrolling back up here, is if you put this strength and power and more than just like a down by down play, but just how he plays in like his hitting, stuff like that. A little fun fact here I saw from he was on the Brugler freak list, or Feldman, but he was mentioned in there. And they mentioned at one point he produced a 1,927-pound hit in a game. So,
He's
he
plenty strong in my
yeah,
opinion.
he can bring he can bring the hammer, but
But I
I
think
do
that
think he gets pushed around.
but he's more of a momentum hitter. I think when you
Yeah.
watch him, you see that he uses his speed to generate that power. IQ, you gave him a 3. I gave him a 4. I did like his IQ diagnosing run plays, so I gave him that 4. But again, I kind
I,
of liked his tape a little bit more.
I just felt like, again, maybe this comes down to more how they deployed him, but I felt like he was not a guy who was like finding a way and getting his nose to the football and just always like diagnosing and being where he needs to be. I felt like he was more, and maybe it's just more of him being the defense, or him being more of a passive player. But when I think of like a really instinctual high IQ linebacker, I think a guy who can diagnose and react quickly, and that just wasn't necessarily, I felt, his game.
Right. Um, I can see that. Coverage, we both gave him a 4. Pass rush, we both gave him a 4. I think he excelled in those areas. And tackling, we both gave him a 3. So overall, I gave him at a 3.83, which is above average, bordering on a guy who I think could hit Pro Bowl type caliber. Um, you gave him a 3.5, solidly above average. I have him a little higher on him, but I think we're kind of in the same area. We both gave him a 2 for durability. That has to do with the ACL injury and probably his size, to be honest.
Hmm.
Giants grade is a 4. I do think they would like his athleticism. They seem to enjoy picking athletes like this. And Goon grade, we both gave him a 3. So overall, a really solid linebacker. Again, a guy who NFL teams loved, NFL scouts loved, and projected this guy as like a day one pick before he tore his ACL. Interesting to see where he goes from here. But I was really looking forward to his year this year. It's not there anymore because of the injury, so that's just unfortunate. Um,
Yeah. One thing I will say for like coverage, I did give him a 4. I don't necessarily know if he's a 4 in a coverage now, but I think I gave him kind of the benefit of the doubt there because he like I mentioned, like his hips and kind of like open field and falling and kind of mirroring these tight ends and receivers. I felt that he has ability as a coverage linebacker that other guys that we're going to talk about just don't have physically. And it's not just pure straight line speed. It's more than that from like a physical coverage standpoint. So I gave him a little bit of a boost. I wanted to say there.
okay. Do you want to move on to the next guy?
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
Why don't you tell us about the next linebacker on our list? Another guy that has a high grade from NFL scouts.
So this was the guy, I watched right after, and I was a big fan of in this. I felt fit much more the traditional linebacker, what I kind of picture. And that's Lander Barton, linebacker, 6'4", 236 pounds out of Utah. He was a 4-star recruit. He's a true junior, and he was a Pac-12 freshman of the year. Going over some stats in 2023, he only played 7 games. He had 43 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 0 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, 3 passes defended, and a 17.9 missed tackle percentage. So, that's down to 8.3 so far. So it seems like something he's improved on, but definitely something, to monitor there. It was not the greatest, especially 20 the year before. I'll say one thing looking more into Lander Barton that really impressed me, does this guy come from a goddamn athletic family? His father,
Yeah.
2-sport athlete at Utah. He played both football and baseball. His mother was a 2-time All-American in basketball at Utah. He has 2 brothers and a sister. One brother, All Pac-12 linebacker, now plays for the Commanders. Other brother, All Pac-12 offensive lineman, now plays for the Cardinals. And his sister was a 4-time All-American volleyball player. This is a goddamn athletic family, and Leonard Barton is just another one of them. He is another freak athlete coming out of his family. Um, what I kind of felt with him is that he was a very natural linebacker. I felt, he in coverage, did a very good job of following the QB's eyes and recognizing the play. He was a very high IQ football player. And I felt like this guy was a guy who had a nose for the football. I felt like he was always at the ball carrier, trying to make a play. And I felt he did have enough strength to take on blockers and shed them. Uh, and I felt he was a really good coverage player overall. I'll say that, like, he was a guy who not only is really strong in zone. I think he is kind of a very natural there. I mentioned like him following the quarterback's eyes and kind of just always being in the right place. But I also felt like he offered a lot in man coverage. I saw him carrying slots, like slot
Yeah.
wide receivers up the field, which, you see this big white guy. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily the thing you expect to do, but he can carry these guys in man coverage. And, sometimes you kind of see with these linebackers, one or the other, either a guy who's a zone guy or a man guy. I feel like this is a guy who does a little bit of both. Um, he also is somebody who I feel is a good blitzer and somebody who can, shed a blocker and get after the quarterback. To me, he's an all around good football player. Really does everything you're looking for from a linebacker. He might not be like special in anything, but he is, I would say, like very good at a lot of things. Some of his cons, uh, he's good, but not great speed. But I would say he's more quick than fast. I would say that, he, although doesn't necessarily have great long speed, I do think he shows some quickness. He definitely lacks some strength. I think he plays with enough, but I do think he lacks some. If you got a little more bulky, be able to take on these blocks a little bit better. I think he does an okay job, but I worry about that translating to the NFL. He can get lost sometimes in the run game. I feel like he when he gets back in zone coverage, he feels like really aware of himself, but not so much then. He can over pursuit and take bad angles at times. And sometimes you'll show hesitation in the run game, that and not really be, you want to see these guys diagnose it and move, and sometimes he kind of waits a little bit too long. But overall, really good football player. I was a big fan of Leonard Barton. What are your thoughts, Sal?
I think you covered everything. He's just a really good linebacker. He's a bit of a mix of like the modern athlete and the throwback middle linebackers. You know,
Yes,
there's
I
a
agree.
nice little mix there, and I like that. I feel like last year's tape, he was more of used as kind of like just a downhill linebacker, and I feel like you're seeing that a little bit, I think, with the younger players in college where they use their natural athleticism to rush the passer, and then as they're truly going to be off-ball linebackers. I think as they progress, they grow in the run game, right? As true guys in the off-ball game. But I mean, I saw enough of him in the run game where I was pretty impressed by what he also offers overall. So I think you covered most of it. What I liked about him most was that he could kind of do it all, right? Like he's
Mhm.
he's good in the run game. I think he has a pretty solid IQ. I think you're a little higher on his IQ than I thought. But either way, like I think this is an NFL IQ linebacker, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think he has good instincts out there. He diagnoses plays quickly, and that's kind of what I care about most from most of these guys, because that's really your job. Your job as an off-ball linebacker is not just to blitz. It's not really just to carry guys in coverage. Those are sort of the ancillary things. Your main job in base formations for the most part, and even in most nickel formations, if you're a true off-ball linebacker, your main job is to sit there and diagnose the play and provide either run support or support in zone or in man coverage. So he's good with that. So I mean, I just want to, I think it's worth going to his scores right away on this. Um, Speed and quickness, you gave him a 4, I gave him a 3. I flirted with the 4 on it with him because I liked his downhill speed. Only reason I didn't give him a 4 is because I don't think that his coverage speed is where I would give like a 4 to. I think he's kind of just average there. But
I
what did
felt
you think
like
about
his
that?
ability to be able to kinda carry, like, tight ends and slot wide receivers, that gave him a boost, and I did feel like he was a guy who showed a lot of quickness, kind of, whether, in zone coverage
I
or
think
just.
quickness. I would agree with quickness. I just don't. I didn't love the speed.
Mhm,
If you want to call it that. But I mean, maybe we're just splitting hairs here. Power and strength. You gave him a 3. I gave him a 4. I liked his hitting. I mean, I
mhm.
liked the way he brought the strength. So why were you a little lower on the strength than I was there?
I felt like it was more than adequate, but I didn't think that he was a guy that he's going to have no issues at the next level with his strength. I think he's a guy who's going to have to add a little bit of bulk to, continue to be able to kind of like stack and shed these guys. I saw some issues at times. He's definitely in the higher end of 3. I just didn't think he has like above average NFL strength if you kind of know what I mean there.
Fair enough. Instincts. You gave him a 4. I gave him a 3. Again, I'm pretty close to a 4 on him there. We just talked about that. Coverage. We both gave him a 4. I think we both like that. Pass rush. You gave him a 2. I'm a little surprised by that. I gave him a 3. I thought he was pretty good in blitzing. What did you think?
I just the production really wasn't there for him. If you in 2022, he had 4.5 sacks. He showed it then as a freshman. But over the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, he has 0 sacks. So it was hard for me, although I saw some potential with him being able to get after the quarterback and saw a little bit in his freshman tape, looking at some of the highlights from that year at least. I it was hard for me to give a 3 to guys 0 sacks over the last 2 years.
That's fair enough. All right. And tackling, I gave him a 4. You gave him a 3. I thought he was a pretty good wrap tackler. What did you think?
I didn't mind, like, I thought when it was good, and when it was bad, it was a bad. You look at we went over it, the 20% missed tackle percentage in so far, and so I had these mixed up, but, he had 8.3 his, freshman year, so that's good, but so far 20% in 2024 and 17.9 in 2023. So, uh,
Yeah, it's sample size too, to some extent. Like
mhm.
you got to see more tackles happen. But I get what you're saying. All
But
right.
yeah, it's like I wasn't gonna kill him for it. I wasn't trying to like, I wasn't gonna give him a 2 or anything like that. But that's a pretty high number, and I gotta, he's gotta prove it more, kind of get the above average mark for me.
There's no durability concerns. I think, and I didn't see a score here. I gave him a 3. Giants grade, we both gave him a
And 3
4.
is right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think he's a solid all around linebacker. We could use a guy like him. And Goon great. I just like the way he plays. He plays with like hyper speed, kind of aggression. I like it. It's a good. We both gave him a 4. I gave him overall 3.5. You gave him a 3.33, a little bit less than me. But overall, I think we both think this guy's an above average NFL linebacker and another one who has like a day one, maybe not day one, but certainly a day two grade.
And I'll say, you know, although this guy ended up graded a little bit lower for me, we didn't have anything that was specific for like run defense in here. So we had tackling, we had run defense. I think that's something that could have knocked him up a little bit. Overall, I do think this was, my type of linebacker. Although he's going to end up being rated lower in some of these guys, as far as like a target I would want, I think he's gonna be pretty high on the list. So it's kind of funny how that works sometimes because these are just subjective grades compared to like what you like and what you look for. So I'm a big fan of him. One I'll mention it before we move on. One guy I just kept popping in my head when I watched him was Logan Wilson. I was a big fan of Logan Wilson coming out of Wyoming, and he hit really well in the NFL. He's a really good linebacker. I think he's a good mix of being a solid coverage linebacker and really being a good like run defender. Maybe neither like the greatest pass rushers, but aren't like somebody who can't do that. So that was the kind of guy I was popping in my head when I was watching him play.
All right. No, so Dune was asking, did y'all do linebacker one yet? So we decided not to rank these guys because we have some discrepancies in our scoring. So we're just going one by one. The guys we reviewed so far are Harold Perkins Jr. and Lander Barton, which brings me to our next linebacker. So I'm going to say right off the bat, this was my highest graded linebacker of the class, and this is, I think, your lowest graded linebacker of the class. So
Yep.
I am about to do LB1 right here. My LB1 is Danny Stutzman, linebacker from OU with that OU DNA from Oklahoma, 6'4", 243 pounds, 4-star recruit. He is a senior. His scores, PFF scores last year, he had a 71.8 overall grade, 73 in the run, 77.1 tackling, 66.1 pass rush, 64.2 coverage. Similar grades this year, although his tackling is a little bit worse, I guess. Last year, he had 125, I'm sorry, 2022, 125 tackles, 11 for a loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, 5 pass deflections, about 15% missed tackle rate. 2023, 104 tackles, 16 for a loss, 3 sacks, 1 interception, 3 pass deflections, 9.7 missed tackle rate. And so far in 2024, 46 tackles, 4 for a loss, no sacks, no interceptions, 17% missed tackle percentage. His dad played football at Baylor. His mother played basketball at Baylor. His sister played softball at FSU. When you watch Danny Stutzman, what stands out is this guy is an above average athlete who is a throwback in terms of his size and his speed at the middle linebacker position. You don't see guys like this at this size play middle linebacker anymore. They all become edge rushers and they put on an extra 20 pounds. Danny Stutzman's playing middle linebacker at that 6'4" size that you don't see all that often. He is a 3-down backer. He can play anywhere on the second level. You can have him play true inside linebacker, weak side linebacker. You can slide him into coverage. You can use him in blitz to get to the quarterback. He has a very high IQ to diagnose plays. I mean, he's fast at processing, and processing matters for linebackers. You want them to be able to process and adequately diagnose plays. That can lead to some mistakes. I'll get to that in a second, but he has a very quick trigger. He sees something happening. He closes fast. There's so many plays you watch of Stutzman where he's in the backfield before the play even begins to develop. Good tackler. I mean, I think that's probably one of the better parts of his game as a linebacker. I want a guy who can tackle. You see that in the linebacker tackling production numbers. Those tackling numbers, by the way, they matter. The guys who get a lot of tackles in college end up being some of the best NFL linebackers. Think of guys like Luke Kuechly, who had insane tackling numbers in college. I mean, it does translate. He does show sideline to sideline range. I don't think he's an elite athlete, but he still can cover ground. He's really good in zone coverage, and I think that has to do with his brain. He processes plays quickly, takes away throwing lanes. Where he struggles is kind of a byproduct of where he's good. He's so good at diagnosing things quickly and making a hyper aggressive move on the play where he will just run past guys at times. Like he'll diagnose the play and run right past the ball carrier because he's going so quick, and he will lose discipline. And there are times, and I think this is where I think people will knock him is he's so aggressive that he will take himself out of plays and he will lose gap discipline. And there were plenty of runs I saw up the middle that went for big plays where he just left his gap, and I don't think that's okay. That's something he has to clean up big time. I don't think he has high end speed to cover tight ends, but I do think he's good enough to cover most of the guys he's going to play in zone. I think he's a really good three down linebacker. I think he's getting better, but I think that the traits that he has, you can't teach that. You can't teach that kind of natural instinct. You can't teach that size and speed. And he's a gamer. You watch the kid; he's hyper productive. I think he's a day two guy. I gave him a high grade. You gave him a less high grade. So I want to hear your thoughts on Danny Stutzman.
So I want to preface, I do want to watch more Danny Stutzman. I do think, this is maybe something that could change because I was looking at PFF. The only all 22 we had available to us was him versus Texas last year. And that was, when I was looking, was his second worst game in the season, and the most missed tackles he had in a game all of last season. So when I watched that game, I tried to look past the missed tackle issues because it didn't look like that was something that was uh replicated over time. And it, kind of what you talked about, it did seem it was from over aggressiveness where he kind of put himself in the wrong position, and that was why he was missing the tackle. Um, Overall, when I watched him, I just didn't see I didn't see him excel in anywhere specific. I felt he was a pretty average athlete. I felt like he had pretty average strength to where I felt like, he could come down and thump in the run game, but I also felt like he was a guy who could get pushed around at times. I felt like he did a solid job in coverage, but I didn't feel like he was a huge advantage there. I felt like he was a guy who could give you something as a pass rusher, but again, I didn't feel like he was a huge advantage there. Um, I will say kind of what you said, I do value guys who have the type of production he has. And he has that production more than anybody. That's something that I look for and it's something I like to see. Um but it's not something that showed up on tape to me. So uh I was not very impressed with what I saw from Jenny Stutzman from what I saw. It really didn't have that much bad to say, and we'll go over our grades, but I didn't have as much good to say, and that'll be kind of, you'll see that when we go through this.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I just feel like you have to ask yourself, what are you looking for in a linebacker, right? Because some of the stuff that these teams covet and that I think sometimes pops on the screen is not what translates to like a good NFL linebacker, right? I mean, what's the ultimate role of the NFL linebacker? If you want a guy who's a three down back, I think you need a guy who has the athleticism to be able to both rush the passer and drop into coverage, at least in zone. You and I think you want those requisite traits. You want a guy who's a great tackler. Again, I can't say that enough. If you're not a good tackler, you cannot play middle linebacker. You can be a lot of things, but you can't be a middle linebacker. And when the play comes your way, I want a middle linebacker who's going to wrap, take somebody down, and end the play. End of story.
Mhm.
I want him in pursuit, and I want his instincts to be really good. I want a good processor. So he has all of that. I will agree that he will. I've said I think he has good, not elite athleticism. I would agree with that. I don't think you need it for the way he plays because he's so quick to diagnose things that he gets there faster than others. I think we said this last year about Jeremiah Trotter, right? That he's a guy that didn't have elite athleticism, but he was good and quick at diagnosing things and getting there. I like that about Stetson. I think he's a little over aggressive. I think some of that comes down with experience, but I just feel like you put this guy on any NFL team and he's an immediate impact player, like a high impact player.
Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't see it. I didn't see a guy who I thought he tackled well outside of those two pretty egregious missed tackles I saw. But again, that was not something that when I looked deeper was something that was a theme of his. I mean, he had pretty low missed tackle percentages. Um, and everybody compliments his tackling. He has good tackling numbers. So not something I tried to hold against IU. I ended up giving him 4 there, and we'll go over that. But Yeah, man. But I didn't feel like he was a guy who was just dominant in the run game. I didn't feel like he was a guy who could stack and shed like the shit out of these guys. And I felt like he came down and he could absolutely demolish a guy in the hole, but it's not somebody I felt like who could, you know, get into his gap, hold the lineman, shut him to the side, and make the move. I felt like he was more of a guy who just just came down with a lot of force and would make a play.
Let's go into his grades because this is where we have our biggest difference. So for speed and quickness, we both gave him a 3. I
Yep.
think that's fair. He's got average NFL speed and quickness. Power and strength, you gave him a 3. I gave him a 4. I saw enough of him putting a beat down on people. I was good enough with it because he's such a good tackler.
Yeah, I mean, for me, pretty much for all of this, I didn't really. To me, I can cover if I want to do that, I'm covering the goon grain. For me, if you're getting pushed around, you're not getting a higher than a
I
three
didn't see
for
him
me.
get pushed around that much. I think
He got
you
pushed
watched
around
a
the
bad
Texas
game.
game.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're allowed to have a bad game.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I need more tape. I only had one of them and
Instincts and
highlights.
IQ, you gave him a 3. I gave him a 5 there. That's, I think, our biggest difference. I saw
That
a guy
was.
with such incredible instincts that it almost took him out of plays because he was too quick to get there. Um,
I felt like he was a guy who was he didn't how to put this. He's a guy who gets a lot of tackles. He even in that Texas game, I think he had 9 tackles in that game, I think. So, I see that, but he just was not a guy who I felt like took like great angles. I felt like he kind of lacked discipline at times. So, I don't know. I didn't see anything. I didn't see like crazy I didn't think he was like fantastic in coverage with his instincts. I don't know. I didn't think it was bad again. I just didn't see anything that really impressed me too much.
Coverage, you gave him a 3. I gave him a 4. I liked him in zone. I guess you didn't like him as much because he doesn't cover guys in man. I'm guessing, is that where you're getting that from?
No, I just didn't think he was that impressive in zone or man. I thought he was fine. I thought he was
You're
like your average linebacker.
you're a true hater. All right.
Yeah, I didn't see
So
it.
all right. So pass rush, we both gave him a 3. Tackling, we both gave him a 4. Uh, Durability, I think you got to give him a 3. Giants
Yeah,
grade, I would
I
give him
didn't
a
really
4.
get around
You
to
probably
his,
give him a
but
3. And Goon grade, I'm giving him a 5. Yes, it's true. I agree with you. I agree with Nunu. This is hate. This is Big 12
W
hate.
bias.
Yeah, this is Big 12 hate. And if
I
he had if I'll put it this way, if Danny Stutzman ends up being a beast next year in the NFL, Monty will agree to make Kevin White his profile picture for like a whole month. What do you say, Monty?
Sure. I will agree to that regardless, but I do want to see more tape before I completely rule out Danny Stutzman. But
And
he was not impressed with what I
before
saw.
we before we move on from Stutzman, do you know what he said about himself?
What?
And this is why he's really linebacker one. He described himself as communion. You know why?
Why?
He said, "I'm the cracker with the juice."
There
That is LB1, folks. The
you
cracker with
go.
the juice. LB1, Danny Stutzman. Don't listen to what Monty has to say. All right, moving on to the next guy. Why don't you introduce him?
Sure. Let's get on to the next one. All right. Jalen Walker. Again, I haven't seen what you done to this guy. You weren't impressed at first, but I was like, no, man, I like this guy. I truly do.
I'm
So
impressed. I'm before you get into him, I'll say this. I got so much crap from people who want to like run laps. I'm like, oh, you said this, you said that. I'm like, I just kind of try to draw conclusions from what I saw. And what I'm going to do this year is I'm just going to talk about what they do and what they do well, and what I don't see, and you can draw your own conclusions. So I'm going to judge him on what he does do, and I think my grade went up when I thought of it that way. So go ahead.
that's fair. I think that's kind of what you got to look with Jalen Walker. So Jalen Walker, linebacker out of Georgia, 6'2", 245 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit. He's a true junior. So this is really kind of his first year getting a lot of snaps. He went to Georgia. You see this with Georgia and Alabama guys all the time. They get these 4 or 5-star recruits and they really don't play a lot to their junior year. So, he's already passed his tackle total for all of last season. so far. So far this season, he has 22 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and 1 pass defended. Last year, he had 20 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Uh, I think the main thing you're going to want to keep in mind, Jalen Walker, is this is not your traditional linebacker. This guy is somebody who I don't know if he is an edge, an off ball linebacker, or both. I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. And I think that's a lot of things that other teams are going to have to try to figure out with him because he does a lot of both for Georgia. You can see him playing, off ball linebacker one snap, and then you can see him play edge rusher one snap. And I think he's very good at both. I think he's a better edge rusher than he is an off ball linebacker. But one thing I do really like about him as an off ball linebacker is he's a guy that, he plays with his hair on fire and he has a nose for the ball. I think he's a guy who just wants to get after the ball carrier no matter where he is and where he's lined up on the football field. Um, I don't think he's a gadget guy. Like I kind of like talked about my issues with Harold Perkins, where I felt like I didn't know what he was legitimately great at outside of an athlete. He's just kind of okay to good at everything. When he has legitimately good traits as an edge player, and I think he's a solid off-ball linebacker. He's been a good tackler. He's struggling a little bit through 2024, but overall he's been a good linebacker. And I felt his athleticism allows him to be decent in coverage. I do think it needs some improvement. I don't think he's ever going to really be a man coverage guy, but I do think he can be zone. I do think he's missing a lot of the nuances for the linebacker position. I think that's something that he's still trying to get down and learn. I think he's more of like a run and chase guy than a true run stuffer. He's not stack and shed type of guy, retain gap integrity. Like that really has not been his game. But when I watch him, I see a guy who has a pretty good IQ for the game, a guy that just oozes traits to me. He oozes traits. He's a guy that, is a former 5-star, and I think that he is a guy that or I guess 4-star. He's a former 4-star, but he's a guy who, has a lot, who's really an overall good football player. I'll pull up some of his pass rush stats because I want to get in a little bit of that too, because I think that's important. But why don't you give me your thoughts on Jalen Walker?
No, I agree with everything. I mean, it's just hard to take this seriously as an off-ball linebacker. I think this is where I struggle with him. He's not an off-ball linebacker like in by any definition. I mean, they line him up there sometimes, but even when he's lined up as an off-ball linebacker, he's coming downhill like almost every play. It's like he's not a guy that frequently drops into coverage. He double with like, that patrol mentality of like the coverage linebackers. He doesn't do any of those things. What he's really good at is seeing like you said, see ball, get ball kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Like he follows the play. If it's a pass play, his instinct is to trigger downhill on the quarterback, right? Like almost on every play. Where if he thinks it's a pass play, he's triggering from wherever he is. And if it's a run play, he's very good at chasing down the ball carrier because of his natural explosive speed. Um, but I don't think he has the built-in instincts of an off-ball linebacker where he's like kind of patiently following the play and then like quickly diagnosing and then triggering because he hasn't played the position.
Yeah.
But as an edge rusher, he's pretty damn good. I mean, I think he's actually pretty solid as an edge rusher. He shows good bend. He has a lot of speed to power, and he's very disruptive. And I mean, obviously, as a blitzer, the guy's a beast. So, I see the Micah Parsons comp in the chat, and I think that's a decent comp. Is like, are
Mm-hmm.
you going to use him like Micah Parsons or like I think you put Hassan Reddick? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these types of players, where they're not really traditional off-ball linebackers. They're really better suited if you slide them to like a pass rusher role. And that may be where he goes in the NFL, because I just don't see him as a true off-ball linebacker that you're going to rely on the run game and the pass game. Are you going to be patient enough to develop those aspects of his game in the NFL? or are you going to just let him do what he does well? El Jefe asked, did Monte get all his work done in time? He did.
Sal didn't.
Well, I was finished a week ago with my side of it. So
Well, you got to watch tape on this guy. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying. All right. So let's get to our scores. We had identical scores on him. Identical because, like I said, I wasn't thrilled about him from the mentality of off-ball linebacker, but just what he does well, I can grade that. And we have identical scores across the board on him.
Real quick before you dive into it, I just wanted to say, as far as I wanted to give a couple pass rush numbers. So far, he leads Georgia right now in pressures. He has 26 pressures on the season. He has a 21.5 pass rush win rate. Incredibly good number. So he's being really successful right now. And last year, he tied Mikael Williams with, or no, sorry, that was last year. He tied, and which was tied with Mikael Williams for the lead last year. So far this year, he has 10, which is tied for second in the team with a 19.4 pass rush win rate. So really, really productive pass rush numbers for a guy who's not even a full-time edge rusher. He really is almost split 50-50 with his box and his D-line reps. So really, really productive pass rusher.
Yep. He's something. Like, I mean, somebody's gonna take him on in the first or second round and just say, I don't know what you are, but I know you can rush the passer, so you can play on my team, you know? And that's kind of where he is. But our scores. We both gave him a 4 for speed and quickness. We both gave him a 3 for power and strength. We both gave him a 4 for instincts and IQ. I do agree that he's really good there. Um, we both gave him a 2 in coverage because he doesn't have any coverage reps. 4 in pass rush, 4 in tackling. Durability, I'd probably give him a 3. Giants grade, I'd give him a 4. And Goon grade, I'd give him a 4. I like the way he plays. Momo says, great work. Vote for Momo. I agree, bro. That reminds me. Thank you for reminding me, Momo. Everybody, NFL.com, NFL.com fan of the year voting. Vote for Momo, NFL fan of the year. Just vote early, vote often. First name Momo, last name in mom's basement. Keep voting until Momo is forced to meet John Mara and Steve Tisch and Joe Shane, and they're forced to shake his hand, and everybody from the DKK is forced to watch Momo do it. It will be amazing.
Right on.
All right, so I think that he's probably the most intriguing guy to watch in Walker, just to see like how he gets used. There's a little bit of Trayvon Walker in this guy, right? I mean, Trayvon Walker was a little bit different. Like he was more a down lineman who they turned into an edge. This is sort of like an edge who they're turning into an off ball, but it's the same thing. It's going to be like the size, speed, freak athlete, and how do you use him? And you're betting on traits. And don't look now, but in his third year, Trayvon Walker is becoming a productive football player. You know,
Yeah,
so
it reminds me a little bit of Nolan Smith a couple years ago. Like they're different, like body frames and all that type of stuff. But Nolan Smith was a guy that people saw as like an edge off ball guy. I think he offers a little bit more off ball than Nolan Smith did.
he
Nolan
plays
Smith,
stronger than Nolan Smith did.
yeah. But Georgia has these guys. They find roles for these guys. I think ultimately you got to find a spot in a 3-4 for him. I don't see any way out he's going to work in a 4-3. I just don't see it. And he, we run a 3-4. That's why I kind of, my Giants fit. I put a 4 on him. I could work. Ideally, you want him in like a Baltimore Ravens type defense. I think that would be an awesome fit for him.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to our fifth. Well, not number 5, but our fifth guy. And this was a guy for those who paid attention to us last year, who we had as our linebacker 2, if I recall, right? Last year,
Sounds right.
Right behind his teammate in our minds.
I watched his teammate again. I'm like, man, I still fucking love this guy.
Yeah, is he even playing over there?
I don't think he is, man. But his tape was so good.
I don't know what they're doing over there in Philly, but all right. Our fifth guy that we're going over is Barrett Carter, linebackers from Clemson, 6'1", 230 pounds, 5-star recruit. He's a senior, second team All ACC. He was linebacker 1 to a lot of people last year. Decided to go back to school. He overall last year he had a 70.6 PFF grade. Now he's up to 76.1. He had a 64.8 run grade last year. He's improved that to 77.7. He had a 49.1 tackle grade last year. He's improved that to 76. He had a 74.1 pass rush grade. He's at 72.2 this year, and his coverage grade went up from 68.3 to 69, so about the same. In 2023, he had 62 total tackles, 10 for loss, 3.5 sacks, 1 interception, 5 fumbles, forced, 20% missed tackle rate. This year, he's improved 35 tackles, 7 for a loss already, 3 sacks already, 1 pass deflection, and an 8% missed tackle rate. Don't look now, but very quietly, Barrett Carter is becoming a better football player with that extra tier, and he was already freaking really good. So, for those who have not seen him, you will notice numbers 0 on Clemson flying all over the field. He is explosive, explosive, explosive. I mean, you just see it. First snap, explosive
Yep.
speed and burst, shoots the gaps in the run game. Like you watch him, you put this down. I agree fully. He has become a better processor of the game this year. If you watch him compared to like the last couple of years, and he's diagnosing plays quickly, shooting the gap, taking out runs for tackles for losses. You see it in those tackle for loss numbers where he's up to 7 already. He's always trying to get his hands in passing windows, got his hands up, knocking balls down. He looks natural in man coverage. He's that answer, right? For that, he's that linebacker that's the answer for that athletic running back, for the Christian McCaffrey, for that tight end that can run routes like a Brock Bowers. He is the guy who you're gonna say you can do all of that. You can cover these guys in man because he is fluid. He's really athletic and fluid in coverage and carry them. He's good in zone. He's good in man. He's a run and chase guy. He does play with a crazy hot motor, and his blitzing skills were already evident as a freshman, and they were evident last year. He still has that, but he's become just a better all around linebacker in every other way with that speed, sideline to sideline range. You know, he's got the whole package. I mean, I think you put it as a con here that he looks a little clunky in zone.
To
I
me.
feel like I think he's improved on that this year. Like he's smoother out there, but I get what you're saying because he was clunky last year. He is still a little undersized at 6 feet tall, but you know what? These linebackers are getting smaller, and he's not like a small 6 feet tall. He's stout. He's 6 feet, 230, 6'1", 230.
He
He's kind
looks
of like
like
he's thickly built, and it doesn't affect him, right? He's taking on tacklers. He gets good leverage. Boom, he takes them to go down. Um, no, it doesn't shed blocks really well. I think that is a little bit of the function of the size. But when he gets his hands on the ball carrier, he takes him down. He doesn't have great ball skills, and he used to miss more tackles. He's really improved that this year. Um, I think you summarized him here, and you wrote this, but I agree with everything you wrote. He's a modern he's a modern like 3 down linebacker. He can go sideline to sideline. He's good in the run game. He's good in coverage. He's a pass rushing monster. He's explosive as an athlete. You can pretty much use him any way you want. Where he struggles might be his skills in zone. Um, not a natural there, but he is improving, like I said. And at the end of the day, he's just an explosive athlete that kind of is an eraser. He's an answer to a lot of offensive scheme and specialist type players that teams are throwing at you now. If he gets a little bit better in zone and bulk, we're talking about kind of an elite linebacker. So that's my take on him. What are your takes on Barrett Carter?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you just said there. I definitely agree with a lot you said about Barrett Carter. I think we disagree a little bit with him as a coverage in zone coverage and as a tackler. But I do, obviously you're seeing the numbers here that he is getting better this year. I mean, you look at his tackling grade from PFF last year, it's a 49.1. He had a 20.5 missed tackle percentage. It was a real problem last year. If you watch Barrett Carter, it didn't matter like what game you watch for Barrett Carter. You would find a missed tackle on whatever tape you watched. It was always there. But you see this year, 76 tackling grade, and he has an 8.3, which is really good missed tackle percentage. So, that was something you wanted to see going into this year. And so far he's fixed. We'll get into my grades. I did more grade him off of last year with that stuff. But if this is truly fixed, that's, I said it like that and his zone coverage. If those two things can get fixed, I think he has a lot of great traits. Zone, for zone, I didn't see the athlete he is. I think he's a really good athlete, and I didn't think it showed up well in zone. I didn't think he has like really fluid hips. like a guy like Harold Perkins has, not to put him, he's not Harold Perkins level athlete. I'm not trying to say that, but just compared to his overall athleticism level, I don't think his hips match up. I don't think um, it's super. I don't think he reads the quarterback's eyes super well, at least like a lot of last year's tape. So, you know, but he went back to school, and that's something that, you know, hopefully I look more and more he is improving on. It seems like he is. I will say, the other thing I feel, you mentioned he's not a great block shedder. That's a concern, but I'll say, you know, I think that's a linebacker to some extent. I think he finds ways to succeed on his own. He succeeds with his athleticism. You know, it's as far as like a blitzer, he's not gonna come in there and rip a spin move on you, rip a swim move, and get to the quarterback. But what he will do is he'll start moving his feet before you even snap the ball, and he'll use his athleticism to get through a gap before the offensive lineman can even get there. And he has great contact balance. So when he gets chipped by these offensive linemen who are barely getting onto him, he does not break stride, and he will bury a running back and you'll bury a quarterback in the backfield. I think that's kind of his superpower, both in run defense and as a blitzer. I want him to improve a little bit more as a block shedder, but I do think that's not his game either. You're not going to ask this guy to be a Mike linebacker. That's not his role. That's not who Barrett Carter is. Like some of these other guys are bigger guys. I wanted to see that. I'm not too worried about the stack and shed shit with Barrett Carter. He's going to be chasing these guys. Like he is going to be coming in and finishing. He's going to be winning with speed. He is your will linebacker, or something along those lines, depending on the type of scheme you run. But Barrett Carter overall is a really good player. Um, I was not super high on Barrett Carter last year based off of where he was being ranked. When we did this last year, we were hearing Barrett Carter as like a first round pick. I thought that was too high. I didn't. First of all, this was before seemingly he's improving. But if he does improve in those areas, I could sell myself on it. But without that, he was clearly a day two guy, and that's where I had to have him right now. But I like him more now that some of the hype is kind of fallen off of Barrett Carter. I think he's suddenly become a sneaky value.
I agree. Let's look at his scores. I mean, I have him a little higher than you, but speed, quickness, we both gave him a 4. Power, strength, we both gave him a 3. IQ, you gave him a 3. I gave him a 4.
I think that
Um,
was coverage mostly for me. Like I think all
and
the
I
kind of.
and I'll preface this by saying I was influenced heavily by his play this year, and the
Mhm.
progress I saw. So that's why I'm a little bit higher here. Coverage for both of us, pass rush for both of us, tackling. You gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. I think that's the thing, an area again where he's improved.
Mhm.
I think he's brought
Yeah, and
himself up to average.
that's built off a lot of tape last year. Like I said, you'd be hard pressed last year to find a game where he didn't have a missed tackle. And I'll say for coverage, like I said, I had a tough one. I kind of had to choose between knocking him in instincts or knocking him in coverage. I was really impressed by him as a man coverage guy. And I didn't even talk about that. You did, but I didn't really talk about that. Like he can run with anybody. When he got put in man coverage, he is not somebody who struggled at all, which you don't see often from linebackers. So it was hard for me not to give him a 4, but he did struggle a little bit as a zone linebacker. But I felt that came more from like instincts and like general football IQ from the coverage position. I don't think there is a little bit of a hips issue there, but I think a lot of it's something that can be learned, and something that he just needs to kind of get better at. So I kind of he needs to get more instinctual there. Could wisen up a little bit in zone coverage, but so that's kind of my reasoning.
Um, I mean, again, coverage 4, pass rush 4, and then tackling. You gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. Like I said, and then overall, I gave him a 3.67. You gave him a 3.33. Both have him as above average. And I mean, something to note, like we have all these guys as above average NFL linebackers. Every
And we
one of them.
didn't kill anyone.
Yeah, we're just kind of parsing hairs about how good they are. So that's the 5. Um, there's a fifth guy I do want to go, a sixth guy I want to go over, and Alex and chat's been kind of hinting at it, but I've been saying, I said before we started I want to go over this guy. So let's go over him real quickly. It's worth mentioning this kid. So the kid I want to go over who's been highly productive this year, um, in my opinion, who's actually played the best of any linebacker in college football this year, is actually a transfer from Arkansas to Ole Miss, Chris Paul Jr. He is a redshirt junior playing at Ole Miss this year. He's 6 feet tall, 240 pounds, 6 to 6'1". Um, productive player for 2 years at Ole Miss, at Arkansas, and getting better. Then he transfers. He's really taking off this year. So last year in 11 games played, he had a total of 74 tackles. So he had 30 solo and 44 assisted tackles. Didn't have he only had 2 sacks and 1 pass deflection, but already in 7 games at Ole Miss this year, he's already up to 48 total tackles, 28 on his own, 20 assisted, 7 for a loss. That he had 7 for a loss total last year. He's at 2.5 sacks already. He has 3 pass deflections already. When you watch him play, he's a little undersized in terms of height, but he plays strong and he's a thumper. Like he comes downhill and knocks guys off their ass. His raw grades and his scores are very impressive this year. If you just look at his PFF scoring, so he has a 90.9 overall PFF grade, an 88.8 in run defense, 81.8 as a tackler, 79.8 as a pass rusher, and an 87.8 in coverage. And a lot of that is zone coverage. But I mean, when you look at these numbers, like 19 pressures, well, they already have them listed. Actually, you know what? Some of these numbers are off. I think PFF has him at 5 sacks with 19 total pressures, 7 hits, 7 hurries. They have him at 40 total tackles with 9 assisted, and he's only missed about 2 tackles, so 3.9% of his tackles. So Chris Paul Jr. at Ole Miss is putting together a very solid year, and I think you're going to see him be a riser as the season goes on. He's going to break his way into this, and I'll be honest, he's a true off-ball linebacker, as opposed to a guy like Walker, who I think
Mhm.
is more of like a tweener, edge rusher. Nothing wrong with that, but like Chris Paul Jr. is like a true middle linebacker that you're going to use in every way. So watch out for him. He didn't quite make the top 5. And a lot of that is based on like how we viewed the top 5 coming into the season and how Brugler has it, but he's someone who's playing really well. There was a guy I wanted to talk about. I want to mention him real quickly. Um, and it's unfortunate because the word just came 2 days ago that he redshirted, but it was a kid I mentioned last year who went back to school from Old Dominion. Do you remember I mentioned Jason Henderson, the kid from
Mhm.
ODU? He's a tackling machine. So Jason Henderson, this poor kid suffered a knee injury week 1, so he had like a gruesome knee injury, so he ended up redshirting. So he's probably going back to school, I imagine, and will be there next year. But this was his 4th year at ODU. He led the nation in assisted tackles, um, but his total tackle numbers. Listen to this: in 2022, he had 186 tackles.
Jesus.
128 assisted, 58 solos. He had 10 tackles for a loss and a sack and 3 pass deflections. Last year as a junior, true junior, 170 total tackles, 118 assisted, 52 solos. He had 20 tackles for a loss, dude. 20 for a loss, 4.5 sacks and a pass deflection, and 1 forced fumble. Unfortunately, he tore up his knee. He's gonna go back to school, but I wanted to bring him up. I mean, he's at ODU. I don't think the kid's an elite athlete when you watch him. He's not like super fast, but he's just one of these guys with the nose for football. I want to bring him up because again, total tackle numbers are one of those things where it seems stupid, but it really translates. It translates to the NFL. Guys who get to the ball carrier, wrap them up, and get that tackle stat, they matter. They're very important, and that skill does translate to the NFL. And how many times do we talk about like, oh, this guy can't tackle, right? Like they have bad tackling technique in the NFL. Guys who have that down coming in, they're well coached typically, and they're immediate assets. So I mean, if you're looking for sleepers and day 3 type guys, look for the guys who have huge tackle numbers. Watch whatever film you can of them, and I think you're going to find guys who will make impacts on NFL teams. At minimum, they get themselves on special teams.
One other guy I wanted to mention before we finish this thing up, and this is definitely a guy I would have pushed for if we really didn't have a clear 5 that was in Brugler's top 50 and kind of felt like those are the guys we should cover because, he usually has a good feel who the NFL is watching. But that's Jay Higgins from Iowa. If you want to look
Mhm.
at some of the PFF numbers, that's a guy
Yeah,
who's blowing it away
he's
right now.
yep. He's
and he
he's he's the one guy who's scoring better than Chris Paul in like overall
mhm.
grade.
And this isn't a 1-year thing for him at all. Like, he was almost just as good last year. And the impressive thing about him is he is a very, very good coverage linebacker, which obviously in today's NFL, that's something you're looking for. Last year at a 90.8 coverage grade, this year is a 93.9. The NFL passer rating when targeting him right now is 36.6. He has 2 interceptions in a pass defended already this year. So he only has a 7.3% missed tackle rate. He had an 8% last year. From what I read, he's a very, very good technical, strong tackler. Maybe not the best athlete in the world, but maybe not the strongest guy in the world, but a guy who's a very strong, good tackler. He had 114 tackles. I think that was just his solo tackles. So
No,
100.
no, that was his totals.
I'm gonna double check that, but still,
His
like
solos? No, I gotta look that up.
because
that, that can't be right.
I think that's how they do it.
I'll look
Yeah,
this
it
up.
is. He had 171 tackles last year.
That's insane.
He had 171 tackles last year, on top of being a very, very good pass coverage linebacker. So, not the biggest guy in the world, and from what I read, not the most athletic guy in the world, not the strongest guy in the world, but just a super instinctual linebacker who is very good in coverage and a very technically sound linebacker, so and tackler. So that's somebody that Sal and I for sure will be looking at some point. And we will update you guys on. But somebody for you guys to take a look at, Jay Higgins from Iowa.
All right. So we went over what, five, six, seven, eight guys really. It was seven and one mention. And again, we didn't rank these guys, but for those who came late, we had Harold Perkins Jr. from LSU, who unfortunately tore his ACL. A bit of a tweener. We had Lander Barton from Utah. We had Danny Stutzman, who we fought over from Oklahoma. Uh, Jalen Jalen Walker from Georgia, and Barrett Carter from Clemson. That's our top five. And then the other two that we went over are guys who are really producing at a high level. We just mentioned Chris Paul Jr. and Jay Higgins. So um, that's our linebacker preview. This is obviously going to change when we get further and closer to the draft. It's time to start talking about this week's college football game. So let's pull up the schedule and tell me if you are focusing on any games this weekend for our friends here to pay attention to and watch.
Well, I know the game that I'll be focusing on. I am going down to Morgantown, West Virginia this weekend. I will be
Oh no,
watching West Virginia take on Kansas State, 7:30, our homecoming game. So, wish West Virginia luck. That's the game I'll be mostly watching this week and getting hammered all day all day at tailgating. But let's take a look at some of these
I'm
games
not.
that
I
are
mean,
gonna.
so who's holding your bail money this time?
Yeah. My wife will be there. We're good.
All right, is she going to be arrested too, or
Hopefully not.
hopefully not? All right, all right. There are
Well,
some good ones. So good luck. Good luck to the Mountaineers. Trust the climb. Oh,
trust the
I don't
climb.
want. I don't want to listen to this guy miserable after a loss
Br-
at homecoming.
Bring us Jimbo Fisher. Go on.
Right there you go.
Bring him
Um,
home.
So, looking at Friday, there's a couple of interesting games. Florida State at Duke, if you want to be miserable. Number two, Oregon at Purdue could be a little bit of fun. It's an 8 o'clock game. Oklahoma State, BYU, and Fresno State and Nevada. Nothing I'm going crazy watching. There are some Thursday games. Boston College and Virginia Tech for those who like the ACC. Miami at Louisville on Saturday is a pretty good 12 o'clock game. But the one that I like at 12 o'clock the most, Monty, is actually Nebraska at number 16, Indiana. So Indiana is interesting. We've heard our friend DK talking about them. Their coach came from James Madison, and they're immediately looking like a powerhouse. I mean, they're a good football team. They've climbed up to number 16 overall. They are favorites at home against Nebraska. Nebraska obviously has the freshman phenom Dylan Raiola. So this could
Mm-hmm.
be a fun game for whoever's sitting at home at 12 o'clock. Um, the game to watch at 3:30, I think, is Alabama number 7 at Tennessee number 11 in the country.
Two
That's on
great
ABC.
quarterbacks.
Yeah, two really good quarterback prospects, and I suspect two that'll probably both come out in 2026, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Jalen Milroe, I don't know yet when he's coming out, and obviously Nico Yamyaleva, however you want to say it,
Uh,
the star who
Nick,
looks like the best quarterback in the 2026 class right now. Um,
depending on
and
the
then,
eyes.
yeah, you got Michigan at Illinois. That's going to be terrible to watch, but they're both ranked. Um, and then I think you got to go down a little bit further to the night games, and you have a doozy. The
Mm-hmm.
7:30 game to watch is number 5 Georgia against number 1 Texas, and that is a battle. This is in Texas. It's in Austin. Number 1 in the country, Texas, with Quinn Ewers back at quarterback against Carson Beck and Georgia. I think that's the game everybody should be watching at nighttime at 7:30, except for Monty, who's going to
I
be at the West
disagree.
Virginia game. Yeah, I'll go back and forth just to see what's going on over there. But I mean that's some good games, and then the nighttime games. There's really not much. There's a TCU Utah game you guys might be into,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean it's actually a pretty decent weekend of college football.
It's a good slate. I'll I will say to push to the 12 o'clock game with Miami Louisville. I think this really is the last. I mean, you play normal competition, but Louisville has a very solid defense. This is probably like one of your last tests for Cam Ward until the ACC championship or the playoffs or whatnot. And Cam Ward has put together some really impressive halves of football. Really impressive, like incredibly impressive, but he really hasn't put together a complete game against a good defense. So that's something I want to see from Cam Ward this week. I want to see him put together a complete game against a good defense from start to finish. And yeah, because I mean, to show he has that in him, I think that will be good, really good for his draft stock.
I mean, we're getting a lot of questions from people on the timeline and DMs, like, "What do you think of this quarterback? What do you think about this quarterback? What do you think about this quarterback?" And I've just until now, I've just been like, I'm not ready to have this conversation yet. Mainly because we haven't really sat down and watched them in great depth this year, other than just their Saturday games. Cam Ward is probably the guy who has done the most to improve his stock without doubt so far.
Hmm.
But I'm going to stay reserved on Cam Ward. I've always liked Cam Ward. I've liked him for like this is my third year of watching him pretty
Yeah.
closely, and I've liked the kid. But the reason I'm going to stay patient and reserved on Cam Ward is pretty simple. I've seen him do this before, where he puts together an incredible stretch to start the season, and then everything goes to shit after that. And I need him to hold up. That's all I'm saying. Like he's been
Hmm.
fantastic this year so far, but I need to see him avoid his tendencies to play like this crazy hero ball shit that leads to terrible turnovers, really sloppy football, and then losses like start piling up for his team. You need to see a disciplined game manager, Cam Ward. You can't. We know he's got all the talent in the world. He's got an incredible arm. His arm talent's uniquely exceptional.
Hmm.
He's a big, strong kid. He has enough athletic ability to hurt you with his legs, although he doesn't do it a ton. And he can make every throw on the field. But if he can just stay within himself and stay disciplined, you're going to see him rise. If he starts reverting to like just this sort of undisciplined player whose mechanics fall apart, for no reason and starts making crazy plays, you're going to see his stock tank. He does not have a solid floor, people. Everybody thinks this guy's like, you cannot compare him to Caleb. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Caleb
I
Williams
was
had won a
agreeing with
Heisman
that.
Trophy and was an elite talent going into last year. And the reason he played hero ball was because that offense demanded it of him. It's a very different situation. I think Cam Ward just does it sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Me and Alex had this conversation. No, I do want to push back as well on the Caleb stuff because yeah, there's two things. One, by the time you really started seeing the chinks in the armor from Caleb Williams, he had a Heisman Trophy under his belt. And the second thing is when you're comparing, like, look, there are similar play styles between Caleb Williams and Cam Ward. I definitely see that. But as far as the arm talent, Cam Ward is not in the same stratosphere as Caleb Williams. He's very talented, does a lot of the same things, but he can't sling it. He can't sling it like Caleb Williams can. So, you know, we will get more into that when we get to the quarterback episode. I will say I've seen a little bit here and there from Cam Ward of some of that like craziness, that Cam Ward experience, as we like to call it. So
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see a clean game. I want to not see that against a good defense for a full game. And I'll say, the 2 times he's played a good defense, you saw him really rally back and win those games, but also at the same time, like I'm not going to take anything away from the kid, but how are we all sitting here feeling about Cam Ward if two 50-50 calls from the refs go the other way? Legitimately 50-50, that interception touched, or that it was pass breakup touchdown, whatever it was, and then that targeting call. Of those two, which I think were total 50-50s, like I don't think Miami got screwed. I don't think they got like gifted anything. I don't think anything was true 50-50s. If those go the other way, do you feel different if he has 2 losses? I don't. It's just something
I think
worth considering.
I think Cam Ward is just. This is not a knock. I would celebrate if we got Cam Ward. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I would absolutely celebrate if we got Cam Ward.
because
But
he has upside.
tremendous upside, and there's so much talent there. But Cam Ward to me is just the leader of the pack of a class that is full of guys with upside and almost no floor. And that is,
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about grading quarterbacks and giving them first round grades, you cannot have like a floorless quarterback. And that's the concern, right? With a lot of these guys. In my opinion, there is only one quarterback in this entire class that has a high floor and high upside. And I'm not even saying elite upside, just high upside, high floor. Everybody else to me is a gigantic, question mark. Not necessarily bad, but a lot of variance.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're just gonna have to see the season play out. I think honestly, we're gonna probably have to reserve our QB review till like really late in the season to get a really good feel for these guys, because there's a lot can change going into the playoffs. And I kind of want to wait till we're almost at the end of the full regular season and then be able to like say this is what we're looking for in the playoffs, because you need as much evidence as you can on these guys. Nobody has solidified their place to me other than Shador Sanders. Nobody has solidified their place at the
I
top of this draft.
I 100% agree. I think a terrible week by. I mean, you saw it with Jalen Milrow. Everybody was calling Jalen Milrow QB2. That was like the consensus like a week ago. And
Now
look
he's
now.
day two.
Yeah, so people think he's going to go back to school. Like that's how fast this thing can change. It really can change that fast. These guys don't have this built-in installation, and that's why we're kind of just being cautious on this. And that's why it's like
And
when
if
I
you want to
think,
compare it to Caleb, last year, Caleb had a 3-game stretch in a row, 3 straight games where he was really bad. And you know how bad it got for Caleb? He might be QB2. He might be the second overall pick, not the first. That's how bad it got for Caleb Williams. That was like his low point, right?
mhm,
And then everybody came to their senses and was like, no, 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 no. He's QB1, right? Like that's how that his floor was high. And Drake May's floor was high. Jaden Daniels worked his way up and made himself a high floor prospect because he had 2 elite traits. Michael Penix Jr. is a very high floor quarterback because he has he has a couple of elite traits, and he showed enough with his legs in the playoff for people to feel comfortable. JJ McCarthy is a very high floor quarterback because he can do everything very well. All of these other kids, they could be better than the guys I just listed. I'm not saying they can't be, but they haven't shown enough to show me that their floors are solidified yet. And
and
I feel like you got to see that happen first.
and it's also worth mentioning, with the exception of what Drew Aller, who he's doing something to help his stock right now. These guys are 5th, 6th-year quarterbacks. Like that inherently, if they haven't shown you the capability by now of being like a first round quarterback, that hurts the floor of you, at least from a stock standpoint. Like are people, it's just kind of how it's going to go. If like, are people going to go, if you have a good half of the season, a bad half of the season, are they going to think you are what your good half of the season is, or you are what the rest of your career and your bad half of the season is. Like, that's just kind of, there's a reason these guys went back to school. So, it's a lot of older prospects. You're waiting for the breakout from these guys. I think a lot of people are trying to make something out of a lot of these guys that's not there yet. I think Cam Ward is, a guy who's starting to really deserve it, but people were calling him a top 5 pick before he even played a real opponent. Like, that's just kind of how it's been this year. And you're hearing like Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck, Shador Sanders, Garrett Nussmeier, Quinn Ewers. I can go on and on. They're like, this guy's a first round pick. This guy's a first round pick. This guy's a first round pick. It's the only first round pick lock in my mind right now is Shador
Shador.
Sanders. There's
That's about it.
guys who are trending that way. I think Cam Ward is trending that
I
way.
think Cam Ward is the most likely other guy to be a first round
Yes.
pick at this point. He's the most likely, but he's not a lock to be a first round pick. I can't say this like strong enough. As much as people think that's crazy for me to say, there's a reason guys like Brugler and others are like, I'm not there yet with Ward, And I think I'm in the same camp. Like, I love the kid, but you need to see him do this all year and clean up a lot of years of bad tape. You have to clean it up before you get there. So we'll see. Um, we'll get to the quarterback position when we get to it, but it's just something that we have to keep an eye on and kind of chart week after week. And we are going to get there. But like I said, we're going to wait till the very end this year. Um, Next week, we're going back to offense. And we usually like pick a position based on just what's coming up. But at this point, I hate to say it, but we probably need to dive into offensive tackles.
It's
Um,
getting there, unfortunately.
so, and it's another solid offensive tackle class. So I think it's worth going over. So
Wyatt Millen.
I think. Yeah, so we'll do offensive tackles next week, and I don't know if we want to do a two straight weeks of offensive line, but I think we'll probably just do the alternating thing for a bit. So tune in when we do offensive tackles next week. Um, Again, Giants have the Eagles this week at home at MetLife, so that should be entertaining. The return of Saquon Barkley. As always, like us, subscribe, hit the like button if you don't mind on the YouTube channel. Tell your friends to watch the pod. I know these are not our most popular reviews, and we go over these in-depth reviews of position players, but this is for the diehards. Watch whatever college games you want this weekend. We'll be back next week with our review of awesome offensive tackles. You can find me at Queens_guy on Twitter. Find Monty at MONTECRI5TO. You can reach us at He's a Giant Pod. Other than that, we'll see you guys next week. Go Giants.
Go Giants.